Well, I think that clearly for India, the goal of this conference in Kashmir was to essentially show that it's perfectly possible and easy to host major international conferences in Kashmir. And of course, the message that was meant to be conveyed to the international community is that there's sufficient peace and stability in the region to allow for these types of conferences. I do think it is notable, though, that there were several countries that chose not to participate, several G20 countries that chose not to participate. China was not a surprise. Saudi Arabia was a surprise in that Saudi Arabia has seen its relations with India grow significantly over the last few years. And of course, there were several other countries that chose not to have a representative there, including Egypt, which is also pretty significant. Again, relations between India and Egypt are growing a lot. The Egyptian president was Prime Minister Modi's Republic Day guest earlier this year. So I think that the bottom line is that the conference went off successfully in the sense that there were no disturbances, there have not been any disruptions, and you still had, I believe, representatives from almost 30 countries that were there. But the fact that you had several key countries, including several G20 members, that chose not to participate, that suggests that there are limits to India's ability to essentially convince the world that all is safe and well, and that it's this is a perfectly appropriate type of summit to hold. You had a number of key countries that clearly do not agree with India's position on the Kashmir issue and chose not to attend. I mean, I do think that despite the fact that several G20 countries didn't go, despite the fact that you had criticism from a senior UN official, and despite the fact that there's criticism from a number of other quarters, I think that the mere fact that this went off as it did so successfully, again with no disruptions or disturbances, I think that's significant in of itself. And even looking at some of the trends playing out in terms of how the international community was perceiving Kashmir before the summit took place suggests to me that I think on the whole the international community buys into the Indian argument. We had seen in previous months that the UAE, for example, had reopened some air links to Srinagar, meaning that it's now possible to fly. Some direct flights, international flights, have been reestablished between the UAE and routes in Kashmir. And there also had been a few new international investment projects announced for Srinagar. So these and also UNESCO. This is very interesting that UNESCO has recently designated Srinagar as one of the world's safe cities, part of this big international cities program. So I think that on the whole, with some exceptions, the international community is not really that focused on the Kashmir issue. And to the extent that it is, it tends to be in terms of looking at Kashmir as an opportunity for investment and so on. But all that said, it's not going as well as India would like to go, in the sense that you still do have this resistance and opposition from a number of countries, and of course Pakistan has been very active in being very public in bringing attention to what it feels to be the very wrong-headed policies that India has carried out in Kashmir. I mean, honestly, I don't think we should overstate the impact that this meeting will have on regional relations. It's already been very clear that there is going to be no improvement in relations one way or the other between India and Pakistan, especially because of the Kashmir issue, and especially since what happened in 2019 when the Article 370 was revoked. I think that was clearly something that Pakistan regarded as a red line, has made it very difficult for the two to be able to move forward in their relationship, whether or not India was going to hold this G20 meeting in Kashmir. But likewise, China, of course, has very tense relations with India for a number of reasons. But one of them is the Kashmir issue. Of course, China takes issue with India's policies on Kashmir as well. But China didn't attend this G20 meeting. I mean, this was not a high-level meeting in the sense that you didn't have top leaders from G20 countries going there. These are representatives from G20 countries focused on tourism. So I think that China's boycott, at the end of the day, it's not going to have major impacts on the G20, on India's G20 presidency, And I really don't see it having major impacts on the relationships between India and China and India and Pakistan. Again, they were not in a good place regardless of what was going to happen with this meeting.
Yeah. So, Michael, in your opinion, what role can major, global powers and
My sense is that the international community, a critical mass of the international community, including many, if not most countries in the Muslim world and OIC members, have essentially concluded that it's best for them to stay out of the dispute, and that's mainly because they value their relations with India and see India as an important trade and commercial partner, and they don't want to do anything that could risk upsetting India. And I know this is a difficult reality for many in Pakistan to swallow, and certainly I would think for many in Kashmir as well. But I just don't see much movement in that regard. You've had a relentless you've had a very prevalent trend for quite some time of international media coverage and certainly human rights activists around the world bringing attention to India's policies in Kashmir, and that will continue. But in terms of governments getting involved and trying to focus attention on the territorial aspects of Kashmir, separate from the rights considerations, I just, quite frankly, don't see that. I don't see that going anywhere. Western capitals, including the United States, they have a very consistent policy that Kashmir is an internal or a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, and best to stay out. So I think that the most you could see would be continued attention from media, from analysts, from activists, bringing attention to the rights considerations, the repression, the militarization, all of that, but not the territorial aspects of it. I just don't see much focus on that from the international community. Well, to me, it reflects this ongoing campaign by the civilian and the military leadership to try to sideline, if not altogether eliminate, PTI as we know it. It wouldn't be the first time that this type of effort is carried out. Many people have cited the example of the MQM, how it was cut down to size. And indeed, the fact that you've had, I believe, at least 24 PTI leaders, most of them not as senior as Mazari, who have now resigned, that can't all just be a coincidence of so many people deciding it's time to move on to other things. They are under pressure, for sure, by the state to get out of PTI and get out of politics. And if you look at that in combination with the arrests of a number of very senior PTI leaders, along with the frequent references made by the government to PTI as a party of miscreants, this all suggests to me that there is a campaign underway to take PTI out of politics, however possible. And one could argue that that has pretty significant implications not only for politics, but I think for democracy as well. And the fact that this is playing out against the backdrop of a very severe economic crisis, to me, that's the big forgotten story here, that with all this political turmoil and all, it makes it difficult to focus attention on the economic stress. Pakistan is just a few weeks away, potentially, from a default. So it really is a very troubling state of affairs.